Across the United States, a growing movement among Black Americans is reshaping how history is discussed, taught, and understood. From classrooms and community centers to YouTube documentaries and social media platforms, many are turning their attention back to Africa, not just as a distant origin, but as a key to understanding modern racial pain, inequality, and anger. Historians say this renewed focus is not accidental. It comes at a time when conversations about systemic racism, police violence, economic disparity, and cultural erasure have reached a critical point. For many Black Americans, the present feels overwhelming, and the answers they seek are increasingly being found in the past. According to scholars, the roots of today's struggles stretch back centuries, beginning long before slavery in America. African societies in the 14th and 15th centuries were complex, organized, and thriving. Kingdoms such as Mali, Songhai, Benin, and Congo had systems of governance, trade networks, education centers, and strong cultural traditions. This history, experts argue, directly challenges the narrative that Africa was undeveloped before European contact. The arrival of European explorers on African shores marked a turning point that would eventually reshape the world. What began as trade and exploration quickly evolved into exploitation. By the late 1400s, European powers had established forts along the African coast, laying the groundwork for the transatlantic slave trade. Millions of Africans were forcibly removed from their homes, families were broken apart, and identities were erased. Cultural historians say this mass displacement did more than supply labor to the Americas. It created generational trauma that continues to affect Black communities today. When people ask why Black Americans carry so much anger or exhaustion, they often ignore the historical weight behind it, said one university researcher specializing in African diaspora studies. That pain didn't start in modern America. It crossed the Atlantic. In recent years, content creators have begun using digital platforms to tell these stories in ways traditional textbooks never did. Long-form YouTube documentaries, podcasts, and visual storytelling projects now focus on emotional truth as much as historical fact. These stories aim to connect African history directly to the lived experiences of Black Americans, explaining how centuries-old events still influence present-day realities. Viewers say these narratives feel personal. Many describe experiencing a mix of grief, validation, and clarity. "I always knew something was missing," said a viewer from Chicago. "Learning about Africa before slavery helped me understand why our community feels so disconnected and why that pain still shows up today." Educators are also paying attention. Some schools and universities have begun expanding African and African American history curricula, emphasizing continuity rather than separation. Teachers say students respond more deeply when history is framed as a living story instead of isolated dates and events. Mental health professionals note another important dimension to this shift. Therapists working with Black clients say that understanding historical trauma can be a powerful step toward healing. When people realize their struggles are not personal failures, but inherited wounds, it changes how they see themselves, explained one licensed counselor. It replaces shame with context. However, the movement has also sparked debate. Critics argue focusing too heavily on historical pain risks reopening old wounds or deepening divisions. Supporters counter that ignoring history has already caused enough damage. "You can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge," said a community organizer in Atlanta. Truth isn't about blame, it's about understanding. Social media data shows a sharp rise in searches and engagement related to African history, Black identity, and the African diaspora over the past few years. Hashtags connected to these topics regularly trend, especially among younger audiences. Analysts say this reflects a generational shift, with younger Black Americans actively seeking narratives that center dignity, truth, and connection. As these conversations continue to grow, many believe they represent more than a trend. They signal a long overdue reckoning. By revisiting Africa's past, Black Americans are not looking to escape the present, but to understand it more clearly. Historians emphasize that this understanding is essential for the entire nation, not just one community. This is American history, one scholar said. The story of Africa is inseparable from the story of America. As the country continues to grapple with questions of race, justice, and identity, voices across the U.S. are calling for a more honest telling of history, one that acknowledges pain, recognizes resilience, and opens the door to meaningful dialogue. For many, reconnecting with Africa is not about looking backward. It is about reclaiming a narrative that was interrupted and using it to move forward with clarity, strength, and truth.